to do and have two meetings at the same time. My goddaughter is receiving a scholarship, and so I'll be leaving right after this, and hopefully maybe I might even make it back from the end. But I sort of wrote this hoping that we'd have some of our new members that showed up. It looks like almost everybody has been longtime members, but we have been over for probably more than 24 journeys, and we've maintained connections with just about all of our hosts. And as I read Paula's request, is how have you met people through FF and maintained friendship? So that's how I've formed my talk today, is around that. First off, let me say that I am very intentional in creating relationships. And I feel that relationships are like most things. What you put in them is what you get out of them. So just how it goes from the time that we actually find out who our host is going to be, we more or less follow this pattern, Roger and I. I'll wait for about a week to see if the host will contact us. And if they don't, then I'll contact them with a letter. And I'll say something like how much we're looking forward to meeting them and learning about their country, their culture, the people, history, food, music, just about everything that I'm really interested in. And I'll also point out that I'm a really curious person, which I am. And I will say that I'm very interested in their country. I ask about their family. And the reason I do this is I'd like to know how many people are going to be in the household, because I like to take presents for everyone who's in the household. Then in this same letter, I'll tell them a little bit about Roger and myself and probably send a picture. And then I'll ask them how they actually like to communicate. And by that, I mean what method of communication. Do they prefer email, WhatsApp, text, phone, Skype? How is it they like to communicate? And I have found that people in different countries have different ways to communicate. Like our last 3 hosts actually preferred to communicate with WhatsApp, that they didn't respond very well at all to email, but they do have WhatsApp. Then I mentioned, now that's the end to that letter. And then about the gifts. We like to take something that's representative of Dallas or Texas. And I usually always take a couple of extra bandanas because they're great for the children. I'll take an extra scarf or 2 because they pack so well. Then let's talk about when we arrive and we actually meet our host for the first time. I remind them that I am a curious person and that I am really interested in people. And I found that the best way to create a relationship is to ask questions. Now, generally, people like to talk about themselves, their family, their work, their country, whatever. And when they talk, I really try to listen. And I think maybe that's the key word, is interest and listen. Listen to what they're saying. And if you can find something that you have a common denominator about, it's great to build a relationship on. Now, the sort of things that I'm talking about that I usually find is like food or cooking, or maybe it's gardening or travel or sports. That if you can make a comment about something that they're interested in, then you have a flow in the conversation. And then when I'm asked questions, I'm happy to share. But I try not to monopolize the conversation. I believe that there is nothing that turns people off like someone who talks too much. Roger often reminds me of that, by the way. And always remember that a conversation is between 2 people, not just one person talking all the time. But again, I remind you that the key word is showing it's the listening and showing interest. Now to maybe an individual trip where this is represented. And I was trying to decide, you know, which trip. And I think the one that may best represent this was our trip to Japan in 2017 when we went with the Whidbey Island Club. And the reason being that we visited two clubs. They were both very different. Our first stop was Tokyo, and we stayed with the president of the Tokyo Club. And he was the king of hosting. He had been hosting for 20 years and had it down to a fine science. He and his wife had just built a new home, and they built it to accommodate ambassadors. They even built a Western style shower, which is just not done in Japan. It's always baths, but they had a shower, they had a Western bathroom, even a Western bedroom with a Western bed instead of the Japanese rolls. And from the moment we met them, it was just such a flow of conversation. Number one, we were working with an expert, and we were really interested in him, and he with us. Now, interesting thing that he's been hosting for 20 years, he and his wife, but he'd only been on one outbound journey, which I found very interesting. Let's see. Now, when we leave someone's home, we always leave them a thank you note. And then when we return home, we will also send another thank you note. And in the thank you note, we invite them to come and visit us in Dallas. And many of them have. They've even come back on a return journey, or they've come on their own. And often we've even gone back. So these have been lifelong friendships. We send New Year's cards by email. And we try not to do Christmas cards because in some of these countries, Christmas is not really recognized, but New Year's is recognized in almost all countries. If there's anything that happens in that country, we to take note of it and we'll drop them a line. And this is usually a natural disaster or something like that, but to make sure they're okay. And this is they've certainly shown the same thing to us. Let there be anything that happens in Texas and we end up with 10 or 12 inquiring emails, or are you okay in Dallas? You know, this might be happening down in it may be in the panhandle, it might be on the coast, but they want to make sure that flood didn't attack us or whatever it is. So, and now I want to talk a little about the second couple. Before I move on to the second couple, this particular couple from Japan, we have connected with twice, and both of these times have been at world conferences. Now, the Japanese are gift givers, so we always exchange gifts. And the last time that we saw them was at the Boulder conference, Boulder, Colorado, and they show up with this beautiful presentation box with 4 beautiful sakis in them. And we gave them a bottle of bourbon, which they were able to share with the other people from Japan. So you learn from what's important to your host, and they learn from us. So that's one way. So now I'd like to go on to the second visit on the Japan trip. And this was just totally different because we visited a small town. It only had about 25,000 people in it, and it was in one of the southern islands. And this was the first time that this family had ever hosted. And the family was made up of 2 school teachers and their 30-year-old son. The father and the mother spoke very little English, and thank goodness the son spoke excellent English, and he was our translator. And when the father picked us up. And by the way, it was the mother that wanted to host. But the father picked us up, and we didn't see the mother until late that night. And he had a sign, and it said, "Welcome, Roger and Sandy." But there was anything except welcome on this man's face. And on the way back to his house, I couldn't be very curious because he didn't speak enough English. And so I was really stumped how this was going to work. And for the whole night, things were really stiff and difficult. I'm thinking, well, this is going to be a really long week here. And things didn't change until just before we got ready to go to bed. And he asked us what we wanted through his son for breakfast. And we said, well, we want what you eat. That's why we came, is we want to experience your food. We want to experience your culture. We want to know about Japan. We want to know about your city. And all of a sudden, this big smile crossed his face, and it never went away. And from that point on, for the next 7 days, he became an instant host. They could not do enough for us, show us enough, introduce us to enough. His wife even taught me how to make, what's those things? The roll-ups. Somebody help me out here. Sushi. Yeah. Sushi. They even taught us how to make sushi, and then sent us home with the little bamboo wrappers, bamboo rolls, so we could make our own. And so, from that moment on, we had connected. And at the end of the week, we had formed such a relationship that we were all crying. And we have continued that relationship. And I am quite sure that if we can ever get rid of this virus thing, that they will come and visit us. But what I do want to read to you is the letter that he wrote to us after we had returned home and we had written him a letter. And so if you've ever used Google Translate, you know it doesn't come across real smooth. But I will read it just the way that he wrote it. And it starts off with, "Hello, dear friends. I use Google Translate. Thank you so much for your mail. Early on, Sandy and Roger were away from our house and 10 days passed. The passing of time is fast. Cherry blossoms are now also leaves cherry trees. The appearance has changed completely. In retrospect, it was a very fulfilling week. At the beginning, although I was nervous and uneasy, I talk about it every day, that everyone was happy to accept. I touched the personality of 2 people and let them learn a lot of things. From now on, we also want to enjoy life a lot." And then the next paragraph, "I appreciate listening to my poor English. Thanks to that, I became able to listen to English better than before. When I travel to Texas, I think that I can speak English a little bit more," in parentheses, laughing. "My wife is getting used to school little by little." She had just changed teaching positions. "But it seems to be hard to change the environment. When I can support you, I would like to do it. Here, it gets warmer little by little. Please take good care of your health. Forever, friends." And to me, that's what Friendship Force is about. it is forming those types of relationship. And when we say we make a difference in the world, they made a difference in our lives. And I think maybe we made some in theirs.